Asked Mark Carney to be his finance minister in 2012. We're going to look at that early in today's show. And the answer is no, he did not. He absolutely did not. Mark Carney is spinning tails. And if he's going to lie about that, what else is he lying about? Carney's hidden carbon tax and trickle down economics. We're going to examine Mark Carney today. Also, there's the interesting idea that Mark Carney is allowed to make money on oil and gas by selling coal and oil pipelines all around the world. But Canada, we need to pay carbon taxes and curtail our ability to develop our natural resources. That's going to save the planet, says Mark Carney. Let me be your next prime minister. I don't think so. I really just don't think so. So the whole thing needs to be looked at. We're going to look at it. Trump goes to Daytona and gives a show in how to be a master populist president. And he does a flyover. He landed his Air Force One. He had the beast drive around the track and waved at the crowd. And so there you go. He was at Daytona. And that was very, lots of people liked it. RFK goes to Monsanto. Why does he go to Monsanto? I looked it up and I've got a reason for why the first thing a confirmed RFK Jr. is going to, what he's going to do is go to Monsanto. And I've got that for you at the end of the show. And Mary Ng is going on an all expense paid trip to Australia and she's bringing absolutely everybody from her office, hundreds of people from her office. Yes. And we're paying for it because it's a trade mission or something. What does the trade mission, what's it going to accomplish? What? There's ostrich news and lots more. So lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Kyle says, this is Kyle Kemper, by the way. I think this is Justin Trudeau's half brother or something like that. And he says, well, he's highlighting this ostrich farm situation. And here's a video. This is apparently the food inspectors looking at the ostriches who should all be dead of bird flu by now. And that's the point being made in the video. Look, they're healthy and alive. They survived the bird flu. Woo. Can we just keep them and not have you kill them for catching the flu? Here we go.
Animals. Okay, please show. Yes, you can see how healthy they look.
Those birds do look healthy.
Okay.
Yeah, those birds do look healthy.
We're a month into this. Is it not fact that this is on CFIA's on your website that it says the incubation period is 2 to 14 days? We're a month in.
Yes, they should have been.
We're a month in. Should they not all be dead?
They should have been done.
Should they not all be dead?
No, some of them will recover.
Okay.
And the same thing happens with ducks.
And that's called herd immunity.
He's standing there tapping his hand like, shouldn't they all, if the incubation is 14 days, we're a month into this, shouldn't they all have had bird flu and died by now? And if the threat is they might die, so we have to kill them, that's not much of an incentive. This one sick one might get everybody else sick and they'll all die. Okay, so you have to kill them all? Yes. Right. So either way, they're all dead. I'll take my chances with the bird flu, thanks. Like, aside from certain death with you guys, right? Like, no thanks. I'm not interested in all that. Here's Mark Carney. So the ostrich situation does not appear to be resolving itself despite the obvious health of the ostriches. So maybe it's not about the health of the ostriches. Maybe it's not about bird flu at all. Here's Brian Lilly. He says, Mark Carney says he was offered to be finance minister by Stephen Harper. He says, I've never heard this before, and neither have many people I know close to Harper. I'll keep following this claim, but what I'm told so far is that Carney isn't exactly telling the truth here. So let's just examine history. Just let's go back using Wikipedia. I know it's not very reliable, but I think this is accurate. So here is Stephen Harper, and he appointed Jim Flaherty on February 6th, 2006. And then, according to Mark Carney, in 2012, Harper was ready to dump Jim Flaherty for Mark Carney. Jim Flaherty finished his run on March 18th, 2014, to be replaced by Joe Oliver. And I think he died shortly after that. But regardless of all of that, is it plausible that Mr. Harper was going to remove a long-standing finance minister in 2012 for reasons? Oh, yeah, Jim, you and I came through that 2008 thing real well, but you know who's even better? Here's my pal Mark Carney here. Look at his yellow teeth. Right? Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's not plausible. It's not plausible. If you have a long-standing finance minister that you've gone through crises with, Mark Carney's yellow teeth are not alluring at all, right? Here's Mark Carney lying to Rosemary Barton.
Get into politics right now. Have you been offered positions in the past?
I have been offered positions in the past. I was offered, for example, Prime Minister Harper asked me if I would be his finance minister in 2012. It wasn't appropriate to proceed with that. I didn't.
Get into politics.
Right. I don't believe him. I don't believe him at all. Here's gov.exe highlighting this. Mark Carney says once selected, his government would use extraordinary powers to build back better. I think he's paraphrasing a little bit. I don't hear build back better in this. We're going to listen to the last 30 seconds of it. And it's interesting what the point Mark Carney's trying to make. And he seems to get flustered a lot. Here we go.
69? What does that mean?
We have extraordinary powers on impacting assessment as well as others, and we can delegate authority.
Why should Canadians believe you'll do anything differently, though, than Justin Trudeau? You've advised him. You've given him advice. You've been a Liberal. So what is going to be markedly different here?
So I don't like that it cuts here. I want to see his answer, because in the lead up to this question, he's angry, he's flustered, and he's pissed off. Look at his face. He's trying to argue with Rosemary, like you're trying to make the point that we're the same. They are the same, and she lays it out, and he doesn't have a really good answer. I'll play the rest of it, but it's a cut, and maybe it cuts out all the fluster. But I wish that we could see his point.
Markedly different here.
Well, for this moment of crisis, for this moment where we have to get our economy not just on track, but build it to be the strongest economy in the G7. That's what my experience, that's where it's directly relevant.
Pivot, right? He got flustered, wanted to argue, and then there's that cut that I don't really like, and he comes back with a pivot. And so it's not really, I'd love to see what happened, the exchange right after that. I don't know if that's what it is or whatever, but we'll see. I'm not sure exactly what he said, but I can tell the body language. I've had people sitting in front of me. I was a student representative for my student body, like the student body president thing, but it was more like a union steward situation. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I was one of the people in the room talking to a professor who was treating some students unfairly, and he really was. And he was very flustered. And I just sat there, and I was in my head, I was like, ooh, he's flustered. Make a note of that, Mark. You could use it. And like, I didn't use it well, but I made notice of it. And I think I flustered him even more by pointing it out to him. Anyway, regardless of all that, it's super interesting that it's that easy to rattle Mark Carney. Gov.exe again says, Mark Carney admits that he has no plan to balance the budget and will continue to borrow and spend. Rosemary really goes after him. It's interesting because she loves Donald Trump. She does not love Donald Trump. Excuse me. She loves Justin Trudeau. So when she's interviewing him, she can barely remove the hearts from her eyes, right? She's like, it's like every time she blinks, the hearts get bigger. But this one, she's actually, asking pertinent questions, which is interesting. It's not often that I have any kind of praise for Rosemary Barton, but she does go after Bart Carney in this one. Here we go.
Will you balance the budget, and how quickly?
A couple of things there. One of the things we're going to do later this week is go through our new fiscal, what I would propose as our fiscal rules. Core to that is to reduce spending of the government, so to balance our operational spending over the course of the next 3 years. To be absolutely clear, what that means in terms of operational spending, it is all the programs that the government runs. It is the transfers to provinces, which, as you know, health and education transfers. It's transfers to individuals. It's debt service, which continues to increase as government goes up. So we will balance that over 3 years. Where we are willing to borrow is to invest and grow this economy. That is an absolute crucial point.
So there'll be a deficit.
It is a fundamental difference between the approach the government has taken up until now. It is a fundamental difference between the approach of Pierre Poilievre, which is a trickle down, let thousand flowers.
But there will be a deficit. It'll just be, you'll justify it because it's investing in the economy.
I thought he was saying that his plan was trickle down, but he's saying Poilievre's plan is trickle down. Apologies, I got it wrong in the preamble. But it's interesting that he's saying, oh, Poilievre is trickle down, and he's trying to make the case that the carbon taxes being on steel, for example, won't trickle down to the consumer, and he's making that case here. But it's inconsistent. And people notice those inconsistencies. The messaging is inconsistent, and it seems like, well, he's messy. He's not very good at being interviewed. Table Salt says Mark Carney wants Canadian steel companies to be punished with carbon taxes, but when he was boss of Brookfield Assets Management, he owned 49% of coal terminals that ship steel coke to Chinese steel companies. So here is Mark Carney talking about this.
And let's take the example of the steel industry. So there's a carbon price on steel. To the extent to which that's paid, yes, that does show up in the cost, for example, of an automobile. That's
okay, but you acknowledge that the consumer would pay more at some point.
Well, the consumer is already paying more.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, the consumer is already paying more. These are marginal amounts. And let's take the example of the steel industry.
So he's not going to take the carbon tax off, and it's okay for him to make money on oil, gas, and coal, but Canada can't? We have to pay a carbon tax? Really? That seems wrong. In fact, from an economic standpoint, you don't want to saddle your citizens with an input tax. That's, well, economically wrong-headed, because what you're doing then is making your citizens, like, you want to be able to maximize your citizens' production. You want to drive the cost of inputs to the lowest possible so that you can make something cool and then sell it to Canadians and the broader world, right? Like if Canada could make the iPhone or something like that, whatever it is, a product that everybody knows, loves, and wants, right? Then you have a better chance of doing that with low input costs. If you have high input costs, then that's a barrier. Somebody needs the money to buy the input to waste it, because you need to blow things up, and you got to crack a couple eggs to make an omelet, right? In order to get your process correct, sometimes you have to do it wrong. Sometimes you have to do it inefficiently. Sometimes you have to do it in a way that is messy and dirty and like, oh man, but it's a proof of concept, and yes, people will pay for it. So how can I do this cleaner and more refined, and again, get my inputs as now the creator of this thing to the lowest point possible, right? And to repeat it as well. And so when you have high input costs, that's a barrier. And so that's a problem that nobody seems to be willing to address at all. Everybody's saying, oh, well, the most important thing is we need to convince you that taking your taxes and putting it on climate change is really important. And I've been shoveling enough. Thank you very much. We can stop the carbon tax any day. It's been successful, right? Like we've turned things back. And who knew that turning off U.S. aid funding would do the trick to solve climate change in the blink of an eye? And I'm being a little facetious. Who knows if that's what's happened? Maybe we're just having a very, very cold winter. But we talked about it at length yesterday on the Kitchen Table Talk. And, there were some people saying it seems like winters from the old days, back when we used to have snowbanks as tall as people and taller, right? And it's like that on my street now. And like, again, it started snowing while I was shoveling. The plow had gone by from yesterday's 30 centimeters we got, or 20 centimeters. So the plow had gone by, so we had to clean up the bottom of the driveway, and it started snowing again. I was like, man, this is crazy. So who knows if it's all fixed and everything's back to normal. I haven't seen any planes, but there's also been lots of cloud cover recently, so I have no idea. But it is interesting that, like, there's not a +0 day forecast in the next 2 weeks, whereas there hasn't been this year, and that's not been normal in Ontario, in my part of Ontario. And I talked to my brother-in-law out in Newfoundland, and my wife did, and but he was saying that there was a lot of snow out his way as well, and it was very much like an old school winter where he's at in Newfoundland. So it's very, across the board, it seems to be changing for the better in very, very fast, at a very fast rate, a rate a lot of people didn't think was possible. So that's interesting to note as well. Dan McTeague says, why are the Liberals ignoring a ruling of the Speaker of the House? He's responding to Eli. Eli says, the, quote, Carney is a shadowy banker overlord conspiracy, robber baron, yeah, right up there with lizard people and chemtrails. I think chemtrails is funded by U.S. aid, and I have the receipts to prove it. So, okay, there's lizard people? Meanwhile, Polyev won't even get a security clearance. I hate it when they I hate it when they make arguments that have just been eviscerated and it's not really a valid argument, and it shows just ideological allegiance rather than critical thinking. I hate that. It really bothers me. Dodges real policy and spends his time selling rage instead of solutions. Maybe focus on the actual grifter in the room. I'd really like Polyev to have some plain language about auditing a full public audit, a transparent full public audit. Oh, I'd like that. I'd vote for anybody who said that, like the Doge guys are doing. But I think it's worthwhile to go through, and that'd probably be a good exercise to make sure that our government is efficient. And nobody, not even Polyev, is proposing that. And Dan McTeague says, so why are the Liberals ignoring the ruling of the Speaker of the House, who's a Liberal, to release the Green Slush Fund document that have led to the shutdown of parliamentary business since September, then follow that with prorogation and a whitewash inquiry into foreign interference? Yeah, I mean, it's not like these people have been above board with anything. So Mark Carney seeming to be a shadowy banker figure, robber baron guy, that's not far off from accurate, I think, from factually accurate. Naya is responding to herself, and she says Mark Carney's company, Brookfield, sells Nigerian oil, not Canadian oil, because, you got to stop those Canadian pipelines from being created. Naya continues, anyone feel like a little Brookfield Carney digging? Lots of info in these places. It's how I found the Nigerian oil and the Bahamas registration. And so she's giving sec.gov and sidaraplus.ca. So there's records there if you're interested in digging. And Table Salt said, sure, I'll take you up on that. And she said, there, I found it. Mark Carney's Brookfield, now American because he ditched Canada while he was chair, owns 49% of the world's largest coal port. Really interesting. So he's allowed to benefit off of energy, foreign energy, but Canada is not allowed to be enriched off of our own domestic energy supply. How long before you think one province breaks off and becomes part of the United States? Alberta? Like there's a reasonable case. I've heard that the separatism sentiment in Alberta is stronger now than in Quebec because they feel like they'd get a better deal in the United States than they are getting in Canada. And I can't disagree with the rationale there. I saw Bruce Pardy, he did a whole big write-up about if I was Alberta, this is how I'd pursue statehood. So, I mean, it's interesting. And like, again, if your federal government is preventing your province from enriching itself by developing its natural resources, that's a problem that you should solve, right? And similarly, if our federal government is overrun by foreign interference, it's a problem we should solve, but we don't seem to be. Andrew says Frank McKenna, who's Carney's former boss at Brookfield, was selected by Trudeau to advise on a reset the relationship with the People's Republic of China after the Huawei issues alongside Dominic Barton. That tells you a lot. The rot runs deep. Quote, members of the committee advising the Trudeau government are a bipartisan mix, including former Premier of New Brunswick and Ambassador to the United States, Frank McKenna, former Consecutive Party interim leader Rona Ambrose, former Ambassador to China and Chair of Rio Tinto, Dominic Barton. Other members include academics from China and Southeast Asia and members of the investment and finance community. The committee eschews notable China hawks and tactfully includes those with interests in Southeast Asia. No committee members or advisors are from the security and defense community, an obvious signal to steer away from a hard balancing security first approach. So yeah, they're trying to either do exactly what China says or have people in place that are communicating that we want to do exactly what China says, right? Like Dominic Barton was integral on coordinating with China during COVID, right? And was taken to task for it as well. Bruce says, have you heard of the public plan to increase Canada's population to 100 million? It's called the Century Initiative. Yes, Mark Carney is involved. CBC Watcher is sharing this. This is Mark Wiseman, co-founder of the Century Initiative. 100 million Canadians by 2100. I've reported on this before. The other co-founder is Dominic Barton, but you won't find him anywhere on the CI website. He got scrubbed. He and Barton convinced Liberals that Canada needed to open the floodgates on immigration, and Liberals obliged. He seems angered that some people blame the Century Initiative for Canada's mass immigration problem. Here he says, in fact, Century Initiative itself has come under fire for its work, and the near unanimous support for immigration that used to exist in our country is under threat. Mark is now the bagman for financing the Carney Liberal leadership campaign. Same people, same mistakes. Nothing changes but the yellow-toothed frontman, right? So there you go. Mark Carney it looks the heir apparent to the Liberal leadership and the next Prime Minister of Canada. So more fool us, I think. Buck is responding to Arif Verini. Verini is announcing, and this is at the end of 24 in November, he's announcing his appointments. He says, with the three announced today, I have now appointed 172 judges in my term as minister. 800 judges have been appointed by our government since 2015, improving accessibility, efficiency, and fairness of our justice system. I'll be sure to keep this historic pace going. Buck says they filled the courts with spurious mischief charges related to the state suppression of political protests for the restoration of basic human rights. That caused court delays that let dangerous people avoid trial. The obvious public outcry became the pretext for appointing a bunch of new judges: stacked Senate, stacked Judiciary, stacked Supreme Court, partisan Chief Justice. And yeah, we're in a situation that is not good for Canadians at all. Maxime Bernier is pointing out how similar the Uniparty is. He says they're so alike, it's astounding. Same message, same policies, same fake patriotism. Justin Trudeau says, I'm damn proud of this country. After they lost the game and booed the Americans, and it's pretty ridiculous. And I'll show you the Americans are not happy about this as well. But that's interesting that he's damn proud of the country for all of their behavior at the game, right? Prime Minister worth his salt would not have encouraged the booing. I feel like Justin Trudeau being there may have been political operatives in the crowd encouraging this. And I'm convinced as well that the people who were fighting at the beginning of the game were told to do that. It doesn't seem usual. In fact, coaches go out of their way to say, you represent our country. You go out there and behave properly. You make sure you set an example, so on and so forth. They certainly don't condone that. Oftentimes, coaches will sit players who pull that crap. They will, especially in tournaments like this. You know what I mean? Like, there's too much about this that is out of character, out of normal. Canadians don't act like that. And coaches don't act like that. And players don't act like that. So somebody told them. Anyway, Polyev says, from far and wide, Canada will always be a proud and sovereign nation. What was it that Tyrion Lannister, the dad, said? Like, if you have to tell somebody you're the king, then you're not the king. If you have to tell somebody these things, then that's not necessarily true. That's not real power. So interesting. It's interesting stuff going on in Canada where people keep saying we are a sovereign country. And I think the point that Donald Trump is trying to make, and I think he's made it a couple of times, is that we are currently now already in the configuration of the 51st state. We don't have to do anything. There's no, like, if I do this, then you're going to get, well, I mean, if I do this, Canadians get to have lower taxes, swept out government, so on and so forth. There's benefits that Trump is trying to highlight. But the point he's trying to make currently is that from the United States domestic policy point of view, Canada is already the 51st state because of the amount of subsidy and sweetheart deals we get with regards to internal trade. We shouldn't have access to that. Trump should use his power to bring cars back from Canada and have them made in Detroit or Maine, and bring oil back to wherever it's made in the United States, because there's a waypoint, and then there's Texas, but there's a waypoint, and that was the waypoint that New Hampshire or something like that. Anyway, there's oil all through the United States, and so Montana, something like that. So they could cut out Canada, they could drop their bills to zero. All of those jobs and all of that money could stay in the United States, and it wouldn't really be skin off their nose. There might be a bump in the transition, but it wouldn't be skin off their nose. They wouldn't care. And so we are already, by depending on that, by needing that to survive, by having 80% of our goods go to the United States, and if they turned it off and said, you know what, we'll just do it here. We don't need that. We need the jobs, and we don't need you guys to do it. No problems. We'll see you guys later. By them doing that, we're screwed. That configuration already puts us in the configuration of 51st state. And all of the arguments about, Doug Ford saying we're integral and we need blah, 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 all this stuff. Yeah, for a little bit, but not forever. And certainly they can get the product from somewhere else, like internally. And so it's interesting to me that people don't acknowledge that. It's interesting to me that that's not part of the conversation. Like, in order to be a sovereign country, we need to wean ourselves off of being dependent on the United States. And nobody's having a serious conversation about that. They're reminiscing about decades old wars. Is that convincing? And as I said the other day, it's like telling your mom, don't you remember the good old times when we were at the vacation, right? We were at Myrtle Beach and it was great and the hotel room was messy and you didn't care. And mom's like, I don't give a shit. Clean your room. Like, yeah, those were fun times. That was weeks ago. Like, clean your room, you moron. And that's what Trump's telling Canada. And we're not listening, I guess. Anyway, here's a quick grab bag of governance before we get into the rest of the show. Pocket says, my son and his friend we're building a snow fort. This is what my kids were doing yesterday. They were tunneling and they were making, and this is what I mean. We haven't been able to do this in years. And I mean, like 2020 was a shadow of this almost. We had some nice big banks of snow, but it wasn't even as big as they're out there now. Right? Like they're out there tomorrow today, and it's still snowing, right? Like, and we've got snow scheduled every day, a centimeter of snow scheduled every day for the next 2 weeks. It's ridiculous. And I don't really put a lot of faith into the weather apps, etc. Like, it's kind of their best guess. As you get closer, it tightens up, and like already from last night to this morning, what was supposed to be just 1 centimeter a day has already changed to like 1 to 3 centimeters on a day. So it's interesting, and we're getting a lot more snow, and that's interesting. And it's February, and oftentimes in February, we're already looking at spring, and people are getting kind of like, whoa, wow, I can't believe we're having warm days already, and no warm days. And so it's super cool to see kids building igloos and being able to do that kind of stuff again. And I love it. I'm having such a fun time. And like, the shoveling is ridiculous. My shoulder hurts. My arm hurts. I was going to sleep last night and I was like, oh, my hand is numb. This is ridiculous. I had to reposition in order to make my hand not numb. This is RTN, and they say Brampton locals spotted in sandals and shorts helping a car leave during a snowstorm. And the guy who's talking over this, he's like, these guys are going to run over themselves. Bad things are going to happen. This guy's my spirit animal. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even watch. Like, the suggestion that one of these guys might get run over in their sandals by this car who has no idea when he's going to get traction, and he's like gunning it. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Sandals is crazy. Sandals. They're wearing sandals and shorts to help this man get out.
Welcome to Brampton. Guess where I live? Literally. Where are we right now? Bro, this guy's gonna run over you guys. He's gonna run over and hit a car. Something bad's gonna happen.
What
the? They're using the wrong end of the shovel. Anyway, it's fine. The sandals are not going to cut it. And the shorts, it's going to get cold. I am surprised at how cold -5 feels. Like, if you're not wearing the right clothes for it. I was like, wow, it's fast before I feel like this is too cold. So interesting stuff going on there. John Fraser is talking about Mary Ng's latest trip. And Mary Ng says, big news, Team Canada is taking on Australia. We're bringing our biggest ever trade mission to Australia with 220 delegates from across all 10 provinces. So everybody in the office is going to Australia, everybody, on the taxpayer dime. Yay. That flight would be a nightmare. I would not want to be on that flight. It's a long flight anyway. I wouldn't want to be on that flight. I feel like you just get a seat and you're in that seat for 20 hours. And it's like, there's 10 hours in, you'd be like, I want to be anywhere else but here. Anywhere but here. I don't know if that's accurate. I've never flown to Australia, but I know it's a really long flight. Maybe it's 12 hours and then you get off and then you go another 8 or something like that. It's a long way. Regardless, 6-7 hours on a plane is enough for me at any stretch. Usually, anything more than that, I'm like, oh man, this is too much. DC Drano, and then you might fly into a Black Hawk helicopter, right? DC Drano says, I know this tariff battle. This is just a quick tariff dip because nobody's doing anything. Nobody's really doing anything to address anything at all. In fact, there's some fentanyl busts here and there, but we're not actually doing anything except rhetoric that sounds like, if you tariff us, we're going to, be really upset with you, Donald Trump. And nobody's acknowledging the reality of the situation, I think. And it's just bothersome. It really bothers me. Anyway, DC Drano highlights how the Americans view this TIF. They are not viewing this as conflict with the Canadian citizens, with the Canadian people. They love the Canadian people. They just think our leadership is stupid. And how long does it take before people can say, well, your leadership is stupid, but the people who voted for them are real good. You know what I mean? And I understand. I'm not trying to victim blame here. I understand that our elections are rigged. But if we just leave our elections rigged, turn a blind eye to it, eventually the Americans' goodwill will dry up. And they'll say, screw those Canadians. I've already seen some people. Cernovich says Canadians are fake nice. Like, there's this whole subculture that's calling Canada out for being fake nice. And like, they point to things like booing at the hockey game. They're like, see, all you needed was a reason to show us who you really are, right? And I can't disagree and argue with them. But At the same time, here's DC Drano. He says, I know this tariff battle has got Canadians seemingly pitted against Americans, but I want to make something clear for the record. Our beef is not with the Canadian people. It's with the Liberal Canadian government terrorizing the Canadian people. Tens of millions of Americans appreciate the Canadian truckers for what they did to destroy COVID protocols worldwide. We are now fighting your hostile government to help liberate you. Yes, the mainstream media in Canada is not going to tell you that. They're not. They're not going to frame it that way. They're not going to mention it. That's what's going on. Trump is trying to help the citizens of Canada. If North Korea was under the boot of a tyrannical dictator and you had the power to free them, maybe, and they couldn't develop their natural resources, and somebody said you could be the 51st state, we'll help you out. You'd probably support that. If you read a book about that, you'd probably support the guys bringing freedom, right? It's unfortunate that they use that exact excuse to expand wars in the Middle East and nobody got freedom really brought to them. Anyway, I digress. Sam Cooper is talking about, and this is in the tariffs because it has to do with the fentanyl stuff, and it just seems like we're not actually taking all of this seriously yet. Still, right? So Sam Cooper says fake Chinese income mortgages fuel Toronto real estate bubble. Canadian bank leaks. Findings of relevance for questions on new fentanyl czar, cartel designations, and for LPC leadership contender and global banker Mark Carney, and election candidates. We've had a fentanyl czar since what, the 13th, 14th then? I think that's when they were appointed. I haven't heard a damn thing from them. They haven't had a press conference. They haven't interfaced with Doug Ford. They haven't had a presser with any of the premiers. They haven't tap danced with Danielle Smith. They haven't done a presser with Justin Trudeau to introduce the fentanyl czar. They haven't said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to crack down on this fentanyl. We're going to make Donald Trump understand that fentanyl is not the problem from Canada. It's the problem from somewhere else. We're going to do everything we can to, help demonstrate how we're taking this threat seriously, and we're going to demonstrate to the President of the United States that we're taking action in order to counter all of this problem. I haven't seen a damn thing. And I watch, maybe not well enough, but I'm one guy. You know what I mean? I am really the only thing. I'm where the rubber meets the road, right? A lot of the time. There's not a whole lot of in between me and you and the news. And so I haven't seen it. And isn't that weird? Don't you think that somebody would be talking about it? Somebody would be like, oh, here's the new fentanyl czar. Juno News, somebody would be talking about that? No, they're not talking about that. Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, no, they're talking about how booing the anthem is really your patriotic duty. Okay, but sounds like maybe there's other things that we should be focusing on right now rather than fostering hatred between Americans and Canadians. Just my opinion, I suppose. Sam Cooper continues, in response to Ottawa's pledge to tackle fentanyl-linked money laundering, including the appointment of a fentanyl czar and new intelligence sharing initiatives with the United States, the Bureau is reposting this February 24 investigation, estimating tens of billions, potentially several hundred billion, laundered through Vancouver and Toronto real estate via underground banking networks tied to China and global narcotics trafficking, including fentanyl. FinTrack's 23 analysis of 48,000 transactions involving members of the Chinese diaspora exposed vast wire transfers from Hong Kong and mainland China, funneled through money mule accounts linked to students, homemakers, and shell businesses, including law firms. These findings raised serious concerns about Canada's banking oversight, but led to no prosecutions in Canada. The study also revealed that laundering patterns central to the U.S. Justice Department $3 billion TD Bank case with international students from China working with Beijing's United Front networks played key roles in the TD Bank money laundering, according to U.S. investigator David Asher, a former Trump administration official. The revelations underscore how the so-called Vancouver model, once centered on laundering drug proceeds through British Columbia's government casinos, evolved during the COVID-19 pandemic, embedding itself deeper in Canada's banking and legal systems. These findings align with research from SFU urban planner Andy Yan, who has documented how foreign capital distorts Canada's housing market, with mortgage approvals and home purchases far exceeding reported local incomes. At the heart of this investigation is HSBC Canada whistleblower DM, who believes they uncovered at least $500 million in dubious Toronto area mortgages backed by fabricated remote work salaries from China. After raising the alarm internally, DM says HSBC Canada introduced only superficial reforms and pressured him to delete critical records, deepening his conviction that Canada's financial oversight remains dangerously weak. So there's an incentive, financial, for them to turn a blind eye and look the other way, because if this all comes down, the whole house comes crashing down, right? And like the implication is that people who are in government, people who are looking over those casinos, people who are doing oversight and pressuring people to delete things, those people are going to be exposed. They don't want that, just like they don't want the Epstein list exposed, and so on and so on. So we'll see. We'll see. Who knows? Ryan says, hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful